When you're building a presentation, there's a number of things you need to keep in mind. So here's just a sampling. I have a sheet online that is specifics of what I want and don't want in a presentation. There's also usually the video I have you watch with the woman presenting about giving presentations from Baylor College of Medicine, so you should watch that as well. Okay, so starting here, this is a combination of different plant presentations from previous semesters, and I'm just going to point out pretty much mostly what are things I don't want you to do, but maybe a few things that are good. Okay, so here, first of all, you don't want any background that has any kind of pattern on it or graphic on it or watermark. You don't want anything that has too much of a difference from top to bottom or side to side of color. So like one side really light, one side dark. It's going to be too hard to find contrast for both sides of that. So as you can see here, I mean, this with the background on there, I mean, I get it. It was a STEM presentation, but it's just not appropriate. The contrast here with the green writing is very low with the background as well. I mean, even if you had white writing, it's still impossible to see. Plus, you see here, it's lighter and darker, so you can't find any writing that's going to be completely contrast. Now, I guess you could put it in a box of white, but it's just distracting, really, the graphic behind it, and just no reason for that. So that's one thing, the high contrast here, there's too many words. This is a technical presentation, so I mean, you could include a cartoon if that's appropriate, but you need to include a real picture next to that as well. Also here, you know, I see what they're doing with the contrast, but when you put that on a projector, it's really hard to see any letters that are outlined like that. Maybe if they were bigger or bolder, I don't know, but I would just avoid that altogether. You want to try to find graphics that are high resolution so that when you enlarge them, it doesn't get all blurry. Now this is good in the fact that the picture is quite large. Words down here at the very bottom in the back of the classroom, or you know, if you're presenting in a hall or something like that, particularly if it's not stadium seating, you're not going to have the people in the back be able to see those bottom things. So I err on trying to keep the stuff up. And that's also, I feel like it's best to put the titles up near the top instead of starting them in the middle. Some of the pre-made presentations start them further down, but I find that to be a waste of valuable space because that upper 2/3 is the space you want to concentrate on. So two things here. You have a parent bullet and sub-bullets. Parent bullets should always be bigger than sub-bullets because they're in, you know, outline format. You should have subtopics under the main topic. That's one thing. Second thing, this font is too small. These pictures are nice. I like them for real. I like that they're relatively big, and I see that they're trying to do the contrast here. This works pretty well with the. We could try it with white against the green, but you know, with the picture here with a bunch of stuff going on and then putting this on top of it, what you need to do is either to label it above or below, probably above, or you could label it on the picture, but you need to put it onto a solid background. So like make the text box black in the back with white writing, or white in the back with black writing. And again, look at this. So in this one, this is all the same presentation. We have different fonts going on, but you see the different bullets here between the two. So that's consistency is very important. So that's not what you want to do. In this case, love the graphics here. They're doing a good job with that. But you know, this could totally be reworked with the examples in bullet points, so or above, you know, next to the different ones you're showing. That's more effective. And one very common use for stems is a food source. There's no reason for that. Like we just said that at the top, right? Stems are as food. Too many words. I bet you if I copied and pasted this, it would be from the internet. And of course, that is not okay. Also, when you put graphics on here, see how this one's squishy? So I can show you. When you add a graphic, what you want to do, and you want to resize it, is you go by the corner. When you use the corner, it doesn't change the proportions. Now, if you go by the side, it stretches it. Some programs, you need to hold down Shift and pull the corners. Some you do not. This is a great beginning slide. Now, it does have graphics on it, but you'll notice that they are, you know, we can still see the writing. It's very clean. It's uniform. So they have the outlines the same on each of the pictures. These are beautiful pictures that are real flowers. And, you know, what you do need to say, though, probably anything on your beginning slide, usually you need to address that. So you'd say, today I'm going to tell you about flowers. Here's you can see that there's a lot of variety and diversity in flowers, and we'll see why some of that is as we go through the presentation. And then maybe you'd start. You know, it's really important to figure out how you're going to start and how you're going to end, and the transitions between slides. So instead of just saying today, just saying, and this is the end, really work on something, just something simple. For example, thank you for listening. That could be the very simplest. Or, so today I've told you about blah, 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 and I'll take any questions. That's also appropriate. Something like that. Or thank you. That could be appropriate as well. But, you need to plan that because it's too hard to come off spur of the moment with some reasonable closing to the presentation. All right, so this has serif font. Remember, we want sans serif. You know that from watching the video. See how these have little lines? This is not good for a presentation on a projector, so we don't want that. But let's look at these transitions here. So this is a different transition than that first one, and these two are the same, but like this first one going in here is different. And then we have a different transition here. And then we have way too many words. You can't even begin to take this apart. So too many words, not simplified to some sort of, spread out bullets or something like that. This really needs to be reworked, and it doesn't even have any images for us to follow along either. So, and like the other one, I'm sure if I copied and pasted this in the internet, it would be exactly copied. And that results in plagiarism, and you earn 0 points for the presentation. And you saw there was a different transition. So really, if you're going to do transitions between slides, they don't need to all be exactly the same. Same timing, same type, all that kind of stuff. They need to be a simple one. Usually a fade is reasonable. If you're going to even do a transition, don't make it too long of a fade. But things like boxes and stuff swinging around and like slides going in and out, those are really, for a technical presentation, not really appropriate. Tables are interesting ideas if it's appropriate for your topic. The words are too small in here though, especially when we get into, looking at it on an overhead. It's very difficult to read and then also kind of overwhelming with everything up at once. If you have a short bullet point, like an example, doing bullet point, then show the next one, show the next one, show the next one. I wouldn't do that. Like, for example, let's see. Okay, let's say they took the asparagus, celery, white potatoes. Celery is actually a leaf, but and onions are mostly leaves. But if they did this in bullet points, I would not put celery, bullet point, chain, show the next one. Asparagus, show the next one. White potatoes, show the next one. I'd put them up all at the same time because it's going to be a very short thing. Now, on the other hand, if you were doing something, let's say you reworked this so it's better, but you have 5 different economic importances and you're going to talk about each in more detail, that I would have each come up separately as you go if you want to keep them all up there at the same time in the end. And you see how slow those transitions were? You need to speed those up. Again, this is a nice big picture. I like that. I probably would hide the other ones and have them come in as you're talking about them, because that way we know where to look. Also, you need a higher res of this picture, but the size of it is great. So here's an example. This is good font with the sans serif font. This is the original slide, and I'm going to show you how I altered it. You'll notice here, these are really nice pictures. Science Photo Library is a good place to go, but you notice they're not the same size. Now, pictures don't always have to be the same size, but in this case, it sort of would make sense. A lot of words. So, for example, each anther contains 4 microsporangia, also known as pollen sacs, which basically you're going to read off the slide. So here's a way that you could change that. And you would have to know your stuff well enough to talk about this besides just reading off the bullets. But this is saying the same thing. 4 microsporangia in pollen sacs per anther. And inside the microsporangia, this is the process going on. Microsporocytes with the microsporangia, blah, blah, blah. So I've shown this here. So we start with microsporocytes. They undergo meiosis to result in half the amount of chromosomes in a structure called a microspore. And then the spore is going to produce the, through mitosis, going to make the pollen grain. That would be how you would transition this slide into something more reasonable. And of course, you do have to explain it. Here's a picture from a presentation that I made. This part is about flowers, so you'll notice that it's nice and clean. There is information, and I might go 1, 2, 3, 4 coming in one by one with the clicker. It depends how long I'm going to talk about each. I do like something, on there, so I just put lines of different colors on mine. So you need a clean presentation. Things with lines, things with blocks of color are fine. You don't want stuff too busy. You can have some sort of, theme, but it really needs to be not cutesy, and it needs to be still very clean theme. There's a lot of them in there that you're going to need to modify. So just because somebody came up with a theme and put it as one that's a preset one does not mean it's good, or good for our purposes at least. Okay, so here we go. What I wanted to show you here is that I'm going to talk about in this slide the 4 whorls. And so those are the 4 major parts of a flower, if you have a complete flower. So you'll notice that I'm only including labels here that I'm going to talk about. So any labels that you are not going to talk about, you need to either delete or you need to cover up with boxes. Second, you'll notice that I have the picture of what I'm going to talk about on the same slide as my words. I find that to be effective. And here I can actually talk about the 2 separate parts. So even on this one, maybe I would actually just take away stigma, style, and ovary and just label carpel on here. And then here I would go over the different parts of what's going on. That might even be better. Let's see. But for example, let's say I'm talking about succulents. I'm not going to write about succulents on one page and show succulents on the next page. I want to put my pictures where I'm talking about the different topics. You'll notice I'm consistent here with the type of modification. I have that in bold. With the type of modification, I have nice big pictures, sometimes cartoons if it's appropriate, but then I also show a real picture of that as well if I can. You'll notice that I have labels of what these things are in a large part. I do want to have some words so that everyone can follow along. You'll notice, like, for example, this comes from a figure, but I've cut out all the figure except for the part that's important for this of what I'm talking about in this slide. Here's another example of a complicated process that I've tried to distill. Now for me too, I know you guys are taking notes, so sometimes my stuff's a little bit maybe wordier, but this is a pretty good one. You'll notice that the fonts are larger to smaller, and I've tried to use not too many words, but make sure that it's clear, okay? So those are the kinds of things, you have to really think about how you're gonna do this. What I also say is that as you're building a presentation, you need to be thinking about how you're going to present it. You should never build a presentation and then figure out how to present it, because then you're trying to force the presentation, which is the most important part, into the slides. And remember, your slides support your presentation, right? So you want to learn, you want to be thinking, what do I want to say? Why am I going to say this? What order makes sense? How am I going to connect these things? And as you build the presentation, that's what you're basing it on, okay? So that's really important that you do it in that order. You're going to stand out from the podium, so you can have a note card, but you don't want to write too much, because then all of a sudden you won't be able to find your stuff on the note card. So those are some of the things I wanted to point out, and it is very important for me that you learn how to make a presentation effectively, so that you have credibility when you go for a job, when you present, let's say data or something for another class. It's a really important skill for you to have.